If you're scrolling through LinkedIn jobs recently, there is an awful lot of jobs with data in it. So it seems like you can forge 20, 50 careers at least out in this field. But how do you approach a data career, and what's important? Which skills should you learn along the way? And how does your perfect path to a data career look? That's a point I can discuss today with Eva Murray.
All around us, data is constantly gaining more and more relevance in our private lives, our businesses, and our careers. For companies, it is turning from a competitive advantage into a survival factor. Those who do not use their data effectively will perish. It is high time to get a grip on the data chaos. Every other Tuesday on Unfuck Your Data, Christian Krug interviews data professionals about how you can bring order to the chaos, thus making the most of your data for your company, your customers, and, of course, for you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and all other listeners. Welcome back to the probably coolest data podcast from Germany, now also brought to you in English, or English, depending on where you live. This is Unfuck Your Data, and I'm your host, Christian Krug. And in this episode, we're not going to tackle a specific data topic, but rather something for all the people who are interested in making a career in exactly that field. And my today's guest, she made quite an impressive data career herself. But recently, she stepped away from solving data issues herself and now is helping others to shape their data career. A warm welcome for Eva Murray, and happy to have you on the show. And Eva, just tell us what we should know about you, the listeners out there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited. And for everyone out there, I would say data careers don't just happen to you. You want to take an active role in that. So that's maybe the one thing to keep in mind as they listen listen to this podcast, and it may be something for them to just ponder a little bit afterwards as well.
And how did you come to becoming a data career coach? So what was your journey, your own journey through the data world?
Yeah, so I actually just this year went all in on my business as a data career coach. And what led me to it was a little bit of luck and but it's not all luck, right? Saying yes to a bunch of opportunities and finding myself in places that I didn't expect. So I will give a very, very brief recap of what has been an exciting 13 plus years in my corporate career before going out on my own. I left home after my Abitur in Germany and lived in New Zealand, ended up going to university there and starting my career at Deloitte. And this is where everything started. And that was the kind of luck or accident that got me into data in the first place. I applied to be a consultant in their HR consulting firm, which was really called human capital. That's what they call it. Yeah. And day one, they're like, hey, welcome to the information management team. And I'm like, what? I studied psychology and HR. Like, what are you doing here? But I decided that day, and I think that really set me up really nicely, even though I still had imposter syndrome along the way. I said, well, if they are willing to stake their reputation on this, then I'm just going to roll with it, because clearly they know what they're doing. And if they think I can do it, then I'm just going to give it a go. What I really enjoyed and what kept me in the industry was going into companies and helping them fix problems that they were excited to fix, and having people say, oh my God, you've made my life easier, rather than going in and planning, restructuring, redundancies and those kind of things. And from there, I went into banking because I wanted to work for a customer organization and really see what an industry is like, and discovered Tableau. Said, I want to do this all day, every day, became a Tableau consultant and trainer, loved it, and then found my way by then I was living in Australia, found my way back to Germany, joined a tech organization, a software company, and from there then joined Snowflake. And that was a very brief run through, but experience working for consultancy, working as a software trainer, working in industry, but also for a vendor or for two different vendors. And that's been, just really fun. And what I saw along the way was, yes, I like the work. I really like doing analysis. I like working with the tools. But I realized my skill is not, or my I guess my calling is not being the best analyst out there. It's helping other people be the best analyst. I'm so much better at helping others be the thing they want to be and be their wing woman, their biggest cheerleader, their support person. That is what I'm really good at. And that's why I decided to make a career of being a data career coach.
Wow, that's an awesome story, and I think maybe we could fill probably an episode about each on each of that section. So, but you've basically touched on almost everything which is there in data. You had consulting with a certain impact of data. You were in the industry. Then you had it with Tableau, which is rather a front end oriented tool. So, presenting data to people. And Snowflake is not the most graphic tool, but rather data warehouse where you process the data and make sense of it. So you have quite broad view. And now, as you tell, I totally relate. Say, okay, I don't want to be the best analyst. I want other people to become the best analyst. And basically what a friend of mine told me, this is the core principle of leadership. Mm-hmm. That like as a leader, you have to step back and let others have the spotlight. So now there are probably some people out there who are at various steps in their career or even pondering, should I make a career in data? Because with AI looming somewhere or even helping us, I think everything is in between. So Eva, what does it take to make a data career, and where should I even start?
Yeah, really good question. And I think it's not as simple anymore as it used to be, because in the past, you just became a data analyst and you went from there. And now there are so many options with so many tools and just so many different pathways you can take between analysis, engineering, and let's say data science, just as like 3 broad categories. And where I would start is, and we had a bit of a conversation about this beforehand as well, is what skills, like what excites you? For me, I liked the visual part. Some people may have heard of the Gestalt principles of visual perception. Mm-hmm. That has an impact on data visualization. It is also what I covered in my psychology degree at university because it's all about the brain. I liked that stuff. I liked translating complex technical things into plain English or plain German for audiences. That's what I loved in my job at Snowflake as a technology evangelist, making complex stuff easy to understand for people so they would buy it. And there are different avenues like that. What I was never great at was programming. When I was in high school, I tried PhD, I tried C++. I never got beyond Hello World. I looked at these books. I'm like, this is not how my brain works. Sure, I could force myself to learn it probably if I had to, but programming was just not on the cards for me. And recognizing that was really helpful. Yeah. But I do think that if you can at least master or get pretty good at SQL as a very standard language for data, that's an amazing baseline to have, right? If somebody says, I want to get into data, I would make SQL part of what you do. Okay. If you're willing to explore more, Python and many other directions and many different technical skills are out there as well. And combining that with other technical skills and with soft skills. And there's things that for me kind of sit in the middle. Requirements gathering, I think there's like a technical or systematic element to it, but there's also a softer side to it, which is all about communicating with people. So you can actually figure out what their requirements are.
Okay, let me get in this. So you say, okay, there is, for all the people out there who want to hear it or don't want to hear it, there is a technical foundation for data that we have to lay. So to start your career, it might be SQL, or as you say, if you really are getting away from programming, say, this is not my world, I want to make beautiful pictures which people understand, you can start with, like you said, Tableau. There is Power BI, there is Click, there is SubAnalytics, all the other tools out there. You can start with a graphic one, but you need a technical foundation on how to put data in that tool and make beautiful graphs out of it, or have a programming language to help you get data from systems into a meaningful sense. So there is no way around a certain technical component in your career if you want to start.
Yes. And I want to give a quick example. Yeah. I never I can look at SQL and I can make sense of what goes on, but I can't write it myself, right? So what I would say is, can you have a career without SQL in data? Yes, you can, but it limits your options. So when I started, and this was in 2013, I picked up Tableau. It's drag and drop. You can create a bunch of things without ever writing a line of code. But I was always dependent on somebody doing the data prep work for me. A data engineer or some other nice person who would give me access, who would get my tables together. And sure, I could learn some of those basics, but I didn't love it because it just didn't come easy to me, and I wanted to focus on other things. So what I would say is, if somebody wants to get into data in a analytical or engineering capacity, there is no way around the technical skills and some of those deeper technical skills. If you say, I really love data, I love, for example, the visual element, or I love some of the more human interaction communication things, I don't really want to do programming, there is still a path for you. It will look very different though. You could, for example, get into product marketing or into marketing in general for a data company or around data topics where your understanding of data, your ability to visualize it, super, super useful. You can create a bunch of things. You don't have to program, but it's a different career. It might be called something with marketing or something with sales. So I think the world of data goes beyond the technical jobs. And that's what we also need to recognize, that if I think of companies any of the vendors out there have people who have great data skills who sit in different teams that are not data related directly, but their skills help them a lot. But so the paths look different. But if you want to be an analyst or an engineer or data scientist, you can't get around having that technical foundation that you mentioned.
Yeah, because this is also what I see when people also talk about leadership, and then it becomes more of these people skills and all that. And even with strategy, and then there are people who say, okay, I don't need that technical foundation, but my opinion is you need some technical foundation. You don't need to be the best programmer, but at a certain point you might be sitting somewhere and require help and nobody's there, and then you have to wait until someone is available again, or even in a, let me say, leadership role or team lead role, you will have tasks where people say, okay, give you an estimate on this will take a week or this will take 3 weeks. And if you've never been into tech a little bit, everything between 1 week and 2 months has to be fine for you.
Yeah.
You can't judge. You have to trust the people on stuff you do not know. So I think it really makes it easier also to transitioning into a leading role if you have some coding experience.
Absolutely. And that is something I actually talk to a lot of people about, is you have to know enough to be dangerous to the other person, to call out their bullshit. Right? Yeah. For that is when somebody says, oh, this is going to take a month, and it's 5 days of effort. Yeah. Well, then you can call them out on it, right? Yeah. And that is the foundations. I think that's actually a really good call out. So you've got individual contributors and you've got leaders, or managers in companies. Yeah. And at some point, the managers have gone from being an individual contributor to, okay, I'm going to go on the management path. At some point, you have to focus then more on investing in your management and leadership skills at the expense of being the most technical expert. And that's why I actually still see a challenge in data and tech teams, where there's often still this expectation, my manager knows more than me. Yeah. No, because if you want a really good manager, at some point, they can't be the most senior technical person, because they need to be a good manager and work on those skills. And that's something that I think as an industry, it would be great to really embrace that and say, okay, I will accept if the individual contributor is more technically skilled than the manager, but the manager, needs to know enough to understand what's going on, what's right, what's wrong, and where to challenge their people, but also where to help them and where to provide additional support.
Yeah, and also about the decisions which are coming from outside of your team. There might be decisions and ideas taken in and which have an impact on your team.
Yeah.
And then you as a manager should be able to see, okay, if we go to this technique, I have this will change that for my data team or for my architecture. So you have to to know at least enough to see the consequences for your team and for your infrastructure, for your data stack on a technical perspective, but also on an organizational one. Like, where do I have to develop my people? Where are they? And for that also, I think a certain technical understanding is crucial, because else someone from a different department can also call bullshit on you and say, okay, hey,
yes,
we did it at my previous company. We did it that way. So you have to change it in your team. And if you then say, okay, hey, I have to consult with my deep tech in the first minute, they will just run over you.
Yeah. And as a leader, you're also a bit of a firewall for your team. You need to protect them from some of the just stupid things that happen in organizations, right? And you can only do that if you have the knowledge. And or have somebody in your team who's like your right-hand person, like, hey, I need to bounce this off you because I'm a little bit out of my depth here, but this is what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? And come to consensus kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
So we drifted from foundations to leadership already. So and in between there is this requirement engineering, where you said, for me, it also shifts a bit. Requirement engineering means, just for me, and then you correct me, is like you have certain business requirements where they say, okay, we need report A or B, or we need this information, or we would like to sell more to Asia. What do we have to do? And also whatever. And they need something. And if you are a total tech head, business and tech often clash. Like the business says, I need this information. The tech guy says, which field do I have to use? Which line of code do you refer to? And they don't know. Yeah. And requirements engineering is the sandwich person in the middle. Gets crushed by both.
Yes. And I think it's actually a fascinating place. Yeah, sorry, you were going to add something more.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine.
So I think that's a really fascinating place, because if you're that person in the middle, it's such a huge opportunity to not just work towards a great solution, but also help both sides understand each other better. Yeah. One thing I often recommend to people is, if you are the data analyst and you are working with the business on some of the requirements for information, and maybe you're building a dashboard or a report, spend, if you can, a day, but at least an hour, just sitting next to your business counterpart and watch them use that report and watch them do their job. You will have your mind blown, because they will do things that you never expected them to do. They will click on things where, like, why did you do that? That's not how I built it. But people use things differently from how the engineers originally expected, right? Yeah. And it tells you so much, and it gives you a bit of appreciation for their challenges on a day-to-day basis and how they need to get information and make decisions and deal with, their customers. But also then the reverse is true, where the person in the business can maybe have a great appreciation of, oh, these are the complexities. And one example is when your CEO or some other senior figure says, oh, this is a great report. How about this question? And you're like, oh my God, it's going to take 3 weeks of data engineering to get all the different bits of data from all the different places. Yeah. It seems like a very justified, simple question for a leader to ask. Yeah. But given the data sources involved, you're like, this is extremely complex. And being able to articulate to them why that is so hard to answer, even though it's like, oh, can we just compare these two regions based on this product and this customer demographic? It's like, yeah, but that's a huge amount of work. I think that's where we get lost, right? Because people, for them, it's simple because it's their bread and butter, the stuff they talk about every day. But at the engineering level, it's like, it's super hard. And if the people in the middle can help everyone understand, they're like a diplomat, right? They're like trying to broker these relationships that can be hugely influential in an organization.
And that is a potential career path, because we say we start at the foundation and say, okay, you need a technical foundation to come into data, be it really in the data team where you build the reports for others, and then you can go into something like requirements engineering, or you can go deeper tech. So which skills then become important, and where should I focus? Or, as you said, some people just end up somewhere and they even themselves don't know where, why, and how. So how to shape your career? If you give a new client one advice, the secret sauce.
The secret sauce is always communication. In my opinion, it's always communication. So we've assumed we laid this foundation of technical skills, right? When you come equipped with some technical skills, communication. And I will tell you why. Any movie you watch, you're like, oh my God, why don't these two people just talk to each other? The whole film would be over. The problem is solved. Every issue between two people can probably be in some way alleviated or solved or made smaller by communication. And it's the same in business. It's the same at work, where if you can be a good communicator, it's going to help you for your entire career and your entire life. So as a data person, what that can look like is becoming more articulate, verbally, in writing, giving presentations, those kind of things. So you can actually get your ideas across. But also it's things like, how do I best communicate with my colleagues? You will have people in your team, and every person is a different type of communicator. Yeah. Some people maybe, and we're both Germans, so we know that Germans are not really the people for small talk generally. That doesn't mean we're unfriendly. It's just not in our mentality, so to speak. So Germans will give it to you straight up, but at least you know what you're up against. And once you've established a good relationship, hey, okay, then we can have a bit of a chat about the weekend and the kids and the dog and all that stuff. But one really memorable event that happened in my life is I got to go to a Tableau conference, and I was at a luncheon with Adam Grant. You probably have heard of the author Adam Grant. And he said, he really likes helping people. And what he wants to give us as advice is the best way he can help us is, or any person in the room, is if we know how to approach him. He said, when you send me an email, say, hi, Adam, then the thing you want from him, and then all the nice stuff like, oh, I heard your talk, blah, blah, like all the compliments, all the fluffy stuff, right? And I thought, oh, great, I'm going to test this out. So I sent him a message. Hi, Adam. My dream is to do a TED Talk. And then I did all the compliments. I got a response. He's like, this is what I need from you. I can't promise a TED Talk, but give me this stuff. And so I sent him a bunch of stuff. Didn't hear anything for a couple of months. Then I heard back, and he's like, do you want to speak at my conference? So I got to fly to Philadelphia. I flew myself to Philadelphia, and I spoke at the Wharton People Analytics Conference, and it was one of the biggest deals in my life. 15-minute slot, but after the CEO of Deloitte, and there was like Richard Thaler there. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist, and just the people in the room. I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing! All because I sent that email to him, and I asked for the thing. And what I want people to take away from this is not to boast. This is to say, if you feel like you're not making progress with somebody, maybe ask them if there's a good way for you to communicate with them. Yeah. I prefer when people are just straight to the point. And if I feel they're being rude, I don't know, I'll just say, okay, well, at least I know what they want from me rather than reading through an essay. And different people prefer different styles. Some people want the direct. Some people want to actually have a little bit of a chat first. Yeah. And then they're ready to talk about other things. And even just being aware of this is really helpful. And if you are a manager of a team, what I would recommend there is get everyone to do one of those profiles of what kind of communicator they are, because then you can get it out in the open and say, oh my God, that's why this person never responds, or whatever the case may be. So communication, there's so many elements to it, but I think even just thinking about, okay, how can I be clearer in my emails? How can I, even as little as, if it's your manager, think about, okay, how can I make this as easy for them to read as possible, as short as possible, maybe bold the stuff, formatting, those kind of things make a huge difference, right?
And also that skill actually helps you in your reports also, not only in the communication between people, but also, this is what I learned in data storytelling, that if you give the information to your manager and say, hey, our sales dumped in, for example, let's take America. Our America figures went down like by 5%. They're going like, okay, what now? And then, because of this and this and this, and because of that. And so, go on. If you would say, hey, we need to increase our marketing effort in the United States because we have seen that our, for example, Facebook ads see less or reach less people. We need to spend more to get the numbers back up again. They will be happy because they see, okay, I have to say yes or no. Yes, increase budget. No, do not increase budget. And then they can dig down to, okay, the numbers went down. We need to do something. Where does it come from? Okay. So not giving people the questions, but giving them, providing them with answers already.
And I love what you said there, because getting to the yes.
Yeah.
I think our goal as the employees or the people in the team should always be to make it as easy for the decision makers as possible to say yes or no. So giving them, but not overwhelming them with information, simply saying, this is my recommendation, here's because, and showing them you've thought ahead, ideally not just one step, but maybe 2 or 3. Yeah. And I love the German concept of mitdenken. And this is to think for somebody else, not because they're lazy, but you have considered their position, you've taken it into account, and you have done some of the mental work for them so they have an easier time. Yeah. And I think some of that also I would categorize as managing your manager, not in some weird kind of way, but just what does this person need from me? If I can give another example, in the past, I traveled in a previous company with the CEO to the West Coast. He's like, hey, we should go to the West Coast. We should, drum up some business. I'm like, okay. Try to get a couple of priorities from him. He's like, I want to meet this and this and this person. Can you put together a 10-day itinerary? So I'm not his assistant, but I put together, okay, how can we meet these people? Who else could we meet? Who's in my network? What is a logical sequence of where we are at what time? And then with his assistant, we figured out flights and accommodation. I would put together a PowerPoint pack that had people profiles so you could read up to them. When are the meetings? When is break time? When are meals? When are dinners? So he has everything he needs to know. And he's like, oh, sweet. And I felt my job, or the way I could be most useful, is if he can just get on the plane and go and not have any, of course he has to prepare himself. I can't put stuff in his brain, but if I can give him all the information he needs and think of all the potential things we would need to cover, then that's my job well done. So it's those kind of things, how can you anticipate what their needs are? And that's the thing you mentioned, right? People will say, okay, so what? What else? What else? What else? How can you anticipate those questions and have the answers ready?
Yeah, and then because if they are really interested and it matters to them, or if they are not convinced, they will ask you the questions. They will go through. Yes. They will go through, because one of the leaders, he was at Datev, a local company here. He said he has one rule for his team. He said, you can come to my office with any problem you have at any time, but you have to bring one potential solution. Mm-hmm. It's not that I care about if that solution is good, or if it's the best one, or if we choose it. But you have thought of one solution. So you went through the process again. And then at each point where I say, oh, this feels awkward, or I have a better idea, we can discuss the solutions and not the problem anymore. And this approach I really liked. I really liked this.
I do too, because I think the blanket statement of don't bring me problems, bring me solutions is often not helpful, because I think sometimes as the team members, we feel like, but it's a problem I can't solve. I don't know what to do. Yeah. But if you bring one type of solution or one potential avenue, that feels much more doable as a normal human being, and then saying, okay, I don't need to have it solved, but I will show them what I think we could do. Yeah. Totally. That's a much better solution than just saying, bring me a solution. It's like, but I don't have one. That's why I'm coming to you.
Yeah. He really said, okay, then the people really come to him and say, okay, this is my idea. And then they discuss. And so he says, sometimes everything is solved. It's fine. It happens. Perfect. And I say, sometimes I disagree. And then we have a discussion on how we deviate or what are other options. And usually they leave the room with a different idea. It says, not necessarily mine is better, but we can then really proceed. And I really like that. So as you said, it's communication. It's communication.
Absolutely, yes.
And so we need a technical foundation, we need communication, and as you said, soft skills, because this is, and I think this especially becomes more important, as you said, there are people who are more direct or people who are more indirect, and especially with cultures. This becomes even broader, because there are some things that you write in German or even crazier Dutch. Dutch and Swiss are the two most direct languages and cultures. If you put stuff to a person across, not even across the ocean, but to the UK in a term that a Dutch or German would say, they will be offended. sometimes.
Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Did you?
No.
There is a fascinating book I read recently. It's called The Culture Map by Aaron Meyer, and I highly recommend it. And there's actually quite a lot of German examples in there. And I'm super interested in the cultural differences because I'm German living in the UK, my partner's American, we have a daughter, and just all the different things that come together. But in my jobs, I've also worked with people from lots of different nationalities. And quite often, I think we underestimate how much culture influences what we do, how we do it, what we say, what we think, and why people do things a certain way. And again, awareness is just like a very big first step where even if you just know, oh, that person might have done it because they grew up in a different place and they have different emphasis on things, or different things matter. I had a colleague from Brazil, and we once talked about offering gifts and accepting gifts. And, being German, I'm like, here's my offer. And he's like, no. I'm like, okay. Whereas for him, he explained to me afterwards, he's like, I have to say no 4 times before I can say yes, even if I wanted the first time round. I'm like, oh my God, 4 times? I don't ask that often. Like, I don't offer that. Like, if you say no, I'm like, okay, you don't want it clearly. I'll give it to someone else. Right. But afterwards, we're like, oh my God, yes, okay, that's fine. And
are you sure you do not want it? No, really not. Are you really sure? Yeah. Oh my God.
But equally, I mean, if I can bring in some food, because I love food, if you go to a German person's house for afternoon tea, there will be 2 cakes on offer, at least, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in other places. There's 1 cake. If there is cake, maybe that's just biscuits with your cup of tea here in England. Like, oh, where's the cake? But it's just all these different expectations. And I think it's actually, once you see it more and more and you notice it, there's so much beauty in it as well. Yeah. And I know we're straying a little bit away from our topic, but one thing that I want to say about soft skills is, and this is probably going to be very controversial in an industry that's heavily influenced by West Coast, by sales, by aggressive sales tactics, is I think it's important to be a nice person at work. And it goes against all the be more assertive, stand your ground, like you've got to blow your own trumpet and all that stuff. But I think, and I want to say this with all the kindness and without judgment, but I think that also a lot of men in the industry can actually learn from women and the things we typically classify as like women's like traits, and they are more soft skills, emotional, all that stuff. Rather, if I get told be more assertive, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be an asshole. And a lot of people don't want to be, and there are other ways. And sometimes it's just the language, it's the way we talk about it. And I think when I say that, being a nice person, I'm not saying be a doormat and say yes to everything. Yeah. I'm just thinking, how can I show up as a human person, like as a human being in this conversation, rather than this is my role, this is my title, this is the outcome I want to achieve. Because in the end, we're all humans and we love the human connection. We don't want to talk to robots and to just ChatGPT all day, right? Like we enjoy being around other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way I've started to think about it, rather than being assertive, because I work with men and women in my job, right? I coach men and I coach women. And I have not yet met a single woman who said, oh yeah, I love being more assertive or being told to be more assertive. For most of them, they're like, I don't even know what to do with that. It's not my language. So for me, if it resonates for people, great, right? Do it. If it doesn't, the way I find it helpful to think about is stepping into your power. What makes you feel confident? What lights you up? What makes you feel like you want to walk into that room and tell everyone about it? And sure, maybe you're an introvert, you're like, oh my God, no, worst nightmare. But there will be something where you're like, yeah, I love doing that stuff. What is that? And how can you channel that in situations where you maybe felt in the past like, oh, my voice isn't heard, I'm not getting to say something in this meeting. Okay, what are the topics where you want to say something, where you can make a huge contribution and people just don't know it? And kind of starting there, because not everyone wants to slam the fist on the table and be like, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. Let's ride at dawn. Right? That's just not everyone's vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are two things I recently read. or read again. She says, don't mistake kindness for weakness, because it's a totally different thing. And also one guy, a dear friend of mine, he posted, said like, the best career advice I can give everyone is be a person who is easy to work with. Don't be the problem maker in the room. Be the problem solver. So be easy to work with. Not like I said, not be the doormat and be everybody's darling. And as the famous German quote from Bavarian Prime Minister was, everybody's darling is everybody's idiot. So not that, but be the person who helps solving stuff and not just cramming up problems in the room and then being assertive about, we can't do it that way.
Exactly. And my term for the people who are the opposite, who are the problem person, I often, the way I've perceived them in organizations or just in settings I came across, was the genius jerk, where they acted like assholes, but it was accepted because, well, they're so good at this thing. Like, that doesn't excuse them from being abusive, from sexual harassment. Like, people do a lot of shit if they can get away with it, just because, but he's the expert in this. And it also applies to women. I've just experienced it more often with men. But it needs to be called out, and you don't want to be that person that acts that way, because if you are so brilliant at something, if you're also somebody who's kind and easy to work with, oh my God, you can go anywhere, right? And it's more fun for everyone, because if people already value your expertise, they're going to value you even more as a person if you also are nice to work with. So
be easy to work with. Like not make too many. I mean, of course, stand your ground. If some request is just plain stupid, you have to defend you and your team, yourself, your time against it. But you can do it by saying, okay, hey, this sucks. I'm not going to do that shit for you. Or you can say, hey, I don't know if that report really provides the value we expect. And let's find some alternative. What is your real problem? How can we proceed? So, because I think the underlying, this report will not solve the underlying problem. Let's have a look there. So really go into not saying, no, I'm not going to do this, to really, okay, what's the real issue? Why are you requesting this report, for example? Okay, but now we get two things covered: soft skills, communication, and hard skills as the foundation. And now there is this branch of options in data from, you mentioned it, engineering, requirements, front end, leadership, then going out of the data team to, for example, market intelligence, marketing data, marketing analyst, sales analyst, production analyst, engineer, whatever. How can I find my path? Like,
very, very good question. And I will share a couple of secrets from how I help people. The first step is always figure out who you are as a person, as a professional. And it's about asking yourself questions on, how do you like to work? And really go detailed. Like, think about, okay, if I had the choice of any place to work in any kind of setting, what would it look like? For me, for example, I love writing content in a coffee shop. I like that it's just a bit busy and I can just do that. If I have to present or create a presentation, once I get to the PowerPoint bit, I'm like, well, I need a big screen. I need my office. I need peace and quiet. Like, all the different ways that you get the best work done. Thinking about those, writing that down, because it's easy to forget and you don't want to hold all that stuff in your head. Like, get it out on paper or on the screen. Also thinking about, what actually do you enjoy the most in your job? And maybe you even still have the job description and you're like, okay, here are 10 things listed. I only do half of them. The other half, no one ever asked me to do. Or maybe you do all of them, but some of them you really enjoy, some of them you really don't. You could even write your ideal job description. Okay, if you had to take your current job and make it, I don't want to say perfect, but like really fun, really engaging, really like challenging and varied, what would that look like? What would your ideal job be if you wrote your own job description? And putting all of those things together, but also listing out, what are your skills? Literally make a list of the skills you bring. Your talents, that can be non-work related, the things you're interested in, because all of that comes together at this intersection of, your skills, your experience, your expertise, all of that stuff is where that meets, that's uniquely you. Nobody else has that combination. And that's the bit you need to figure out. And then using AI, you can get to work on finding, okay, what are some things that match? And there will be so many unknowns. Things where like, I had no idea this job existed. And that's, part of what I do in the coaching is I help people figure out what else they could do with their jobs, because it's easy to say, well, I'm a data analyst in retail. I could just be a data analyst in finance. Okay, you could, and that could be great. But maybe you want to do something completely different with your skill set. So what else is out there that fits your current profile or where you are heading, given the learning and things? So understanding the skills you bring, and you could put a prompt into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is where I'm at right now. These are my skills. Can you find maybe from 5 different companies some jobs I could do? Or can you find things in data engineering that would fit my skills? For me, a lot of the time in my work, I can think of jobs people can do, and then I provide a profile. So it's a little bit the other way around. But also thinking beyond. So let's say you work at Datev or another company. Let's pick a big one. Let's say you work for a bank, right? Everyone knows kind of what banks do. So let's say you work for a bank and you're an analyst in you analyze like client data or something. Well, you could work in another bank. You could work in something adjacent to finance, maybe insurance or something else related. Maybe you go into the legal field. You could go into a different industry, or, well, you could go into consulting, right? You could go and work for a technology company. A lot of people don't ever even consider working for a tech vendor. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity, because that's where there's a lot of really cool jobs, and where there, I think, a lot of new type of jobs are created, because they're like, oh, this is what customers are doing. How do we best respond? We're going to create a new role that serves this kind of thing that customers need. I think Snowflake was very innovative in the types of jobs they created, and the things that I saw there where I'm like, that's a really cool job for somebody who's got experience in a specific industry, who's maybe a bit leaning towards sales or interested in working with sales, but who also loves tech and wants to bring all of that together, and they're more senior in their career. Like, there's a lot of cool things happening in tech companies. So if you are and let's say a data person working with specific software, whatever it is, check out what the technology vendors are actually hiring for as well.
I'm a bit in clinch with some of these vendors.
Oh, interesting.
There are some of these tech vendors really have put a hard time on me during consulting or my current role, where I say, okay, guys, you can't bring that much money to the table that I consider it. I'm not going to drop names now.
Well, okay, I have my own names in mind. No, I mean, there's always going to be companies where no, I won't go there. And what I would also say is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There are companies where you're like, well, this is really exciting technology, but it's been around for a couple of decades. Maybe there's more new stuff coming that's going to be even more exciting. So thinking of that as well. But just looking at the whole spectrum of where you could use your skills, not just from one to, like, not just a sideways move.
Not going from one bank to the other, or
And it's fine if somebody wants to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
if you love finance and absolutely.
And that could be for a step up. But if you're like, I want to do something different, then looking outside that field.
Out. But also, to defend things, earlier in the day, I mean, the generation probably of our parents or others, there were this retirement contracts where you signed at the age of 15 to 16 or 18. You signed with a company and then you spend the time until retirement. So is this still a valid option, or do we have to? Because a lot of coaching is about, we said you really change the job if you're not happy, but still, can you reshape it in the organization, or do you have to leave?
It depends on the organization. I think it's definitely worth exploring. And I always encourage people that even if they've decided they want to leave their job, to just make sure they've they've really given it a good crack so that when they leave, they're like, I can hold my head high. I've given it my best shot. I've tried everything. I can't see a future here. Yeah. Great. You can walk out and no regrets. I personally couldn't think to stay in one place for my entire life. If somebody can, all the power to them. I think that's amazing. Yeah. But it's probably a lot less common these days because also so many things have been created now, like jobs and industries that didn't even exist when our parents were young. What I would say is I'm a risk-averse person, but finding a comfortable level of risk where you're like, okay, this is going to be a sensible choice given, retirement, savings, all of that stuff. But also, we don't want to live our entire life just thinking about retirement, right? Yeah, we want to live our life as well. Yeah. So, and that's where a whole other topic comes in that we don't have time to cover, but people thinking about long-term financial planning and what do you invest in so that your financial future is secured even if you want to change jobs. And that can mean stepping away from a really nice company stock portfolio because you're like, no, I don't want to work here anymore. And just because it takes another 2 or 3 years for my stocks to vest and for me to be able to then have them, I don't want that to ever be something to hold me back. If I want to leave, I want to leave, but it's on me as a person to set myself up financially for the future to not have like golden handcuffs.
Yeah. But it still is possible to say, okay, explore new roles as, for example, when your organization, you're not happy with your job, for example, in, let's call it the banking, you are in the customer portfolio and you've been there for 5 years and you've seen it all there. But now data is emerging more and more. So there's also the possibility to stay at the same company and say, okay, hey, I've dealt with customer data. Now let's please deal with our, for example, stock exchange data. I'm interested in having more data and then can relate this to the customers better because I already know the company and know the people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a great way to go because you already have so much company knowledge as well. And I would bet that everyone who's been somewhere for a few years has so many ideas in their head of what they could improve if they were given the chance. So having ongoing communication with your manager on, hey, how else can I use my skills? How can I expand? And, maybe moving to another team, to another department, but also maybe even just in your existing job. Oh, can I take on a new project? That can already be a step to test out something and see, oh, do I want to do that or not? So yes, use the opportunity if you have it, or create it for yourself by asking. If you don't ask, you don't get it.
So but this all comes back to really the first thing that you said, like know who you are, know what you are interested in, know where your interests and capabilities match. Because there's this famous example of Albert Einstein. He loved playing the violin, but he just was not good at it. So he was much better at math and physics than at, and he also loved that. So find this sweet spot, know who you are, know what your interests are, where your strengths are, and then play to that, and then go for your data career. And as you really said, I think data careers can be quite unpredictable as a lot of stuff turns up currently in the field, like AI. Like 5 years ago, there were no prompt engineers or AI specialists listed somewhere, and now there are quite some out there.
Definitely, and that's maybe if I can drop one quick addition to my soft skills point is learning to ask questions and asking more questions and better questions. And that's, I think, also so important for using AI is how to ask the right questions so you get those answers. And when I use AI to help me do some of the research work for my clients, the only reason why it works so well is because I know exactly what question to ask to get the answer that helps me then put together some, points for them. And it was a tip that I received almost 5 years ago from a mentor is ask more questions, learn to ask questions, and finding opportunities everywhere to ask questions and be curious. And when you sit down with a leader, with a CEO, the one thing that will stand out to most people is, oh my God, they're not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to look silly. Oh my God, why do they not know that? Nobody asks that question. They're like, oh yeah, they just clarified what that word means. Okay, let's move on. So asking questions and not being afraid to do so is a really, really important skill, especially as a data analyst. But sometimes we forget, right? We just take things like, okay, that's what it is. I'll work with that. It's like, no, challenge it. Ask questions.
Yeah, this is a good thing I learned this way back and while studying biology. This was one of the first sentences a professor said to us. He said, like, nature will always give you the right answers. Problem is finding the right question to get this answer.
Yeah.
So we are, looking at the clock, it's like high time to to come to an end of this. Not that I do not enjoy talking to you. I think we could carry on for quite some time, but Eva, there are two small questions that every guest has to go through in this podcast. The listeners from the German episodes know it. Eva, what was the last song that was running on repeat in your head? You just couldn't get out of your mind.
Oh, well, I have a toddler, and it's probably one of her little songs. And actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit on this because it's a book, but the rhyming, it's an American book, and the rhyme is basically like a song. And it's a song about the dinosaur dance, and there are various different dinosaurs, and they shimmy and they shake and they cha-cha-cha. And when I lay awake at night, the song goes through my head, and it drives me crazy because I can't go back to sleep.
Yeah.
It's called The Dinosaur Dance by Sandra Boynton. She's a great American kids book author.
Okay. So now everybody, all the data people out there are now dancing the dinosaur dance. Nice.
Please do. You will not regret it.
And Eva, the second request is, could you recommend a book to us with just two minor things? Please do not recommend a book which is written or co-written by Eva Murray. And the second is no really shady literature we should not have lying around in the office. But apart from that, children books, comics, graphic novels, data science books, we had it all.
Excellent question. This is one, and I'm going to caveat it a little bit. It is aimed at women, but I would love to see men read it because I think they will get a lot from it. And it's called The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control. And when I read it, I listened to the audio version and I was like, oh my God, this is really, really helpful. One of those books that gave me words to describe things I've been kind of feeling all my life, but also that just clarified a lot of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, this is helpful. When you almost feel a little bit like a pile of Lego has been dumped on the floor and somebody then sorted it by color, and you're like, clarity. And if you notice it, I was a bit sneaky. I recommended a book earlier called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. So that way I got two in.
You snuck in the second one,
I did, because I think it is really, really excellent. Yeah. And especially, I mean, anyone, anywhere, but especially your listeners, I'm assuming there's a big European audience where people just work with so many different people from so many different cultures. I highly recommend both of those books.
Thanks. We stick to one, so we will list just one.
Okay.
But everybody now is inclined to hear through the whole episode to get the second book also covered. Dear Eva, then thanks again for your precious time and for the awesome conversation. And of course, thanks to all you listeners out there tuning in today. And this is just the moment where I would ask you kindly to click subscribe, follow, or however the button is called in the player you're currently listening or watching this episode. And Eva, of course, is on LinkedIn. So if you're looking for more advice on your data career, or if a data career is potentially for you, just hit her up, connect, follow. And all the ones who are not following me, please do this now. And of course, we are happy to take any questions from you, which you might still have left. Just send us a note. And that's it for today. I'm looking forward to seeing or hearing you around next time, and have a great time, everyone.
Thank you.